How's it going, everybody? Well, we are live here in Dallas, Texas. You're with the mayor of South Dallas, Jason Davis, Jason Davis Jazz, South Dallas, Jason. Just to get everything started right off the bat, I have music on Bandcamp. You can find me by going to Bandcamp slash Jason Davis Jazz, Bandcamp slash Dallas Jazz Collective. You can find me on Instagram, Dallas Jazz Collective or South Dallas Jason. Uh, I'm here surrounded by instruments, but it's early in the morning and I probably won't be doing too much playing. And just wanted to get up, put my suit on, what I'm saying, get G'd up and just holler at everybody. I'll give you some updates on what I'm working on. I have a stack of music here. I'm gonna be doing some writing, some songwriting today. Be sharing some writing techniques with you. Um, Also, I may play a little something on my horn, uh, kind of starting out, kind of early in the day, and hope the lighting is cool. I could play with it a little bit. I know it's shining on me, kind of serious, but we're working our way through the technical difficulties and through the technical aspects of what we're doing. I thank you for joining me. Uh, so, starting out, we got some coffee. Cup of coffee with Jason Davis. Nothing fancy, but I think this coffee come from the like coffee cup come from one of the dollar stores. But our last episode was very nice. If there are any coffee companies that want to sponsor this show, then hey, I'm wide open to it. Otherwise, I may tell you what kind of. I'll tell you right now what kind of coffee I'm drinking. I believe this is just some of the inexpensive coffee you get at the grocery store. But I'm interested in all different kind of sponsorship for my show. We have a piano here. I do play a little bit for songwriting purposes. I'm no pianist, but I wanted to talk a little bit about my piano teacher. Uh, I had a piano teacher in college. Her name is Miss Rose Coleman. Very interesting lady. Um, she's from I don't know where Miss Coleman is from, but she went to college at Mississippi Valley State University, or it was maybe Mississippi Valley College at the time or something to that effect. But she went to Mississippi Valley, and she told me a story one day. She said, "Well, Jason, her husband is Dr. Herbert Coleman." And she said, Dr. Coleman is the first music PhD from Mississippi Valley State. And I remember meeting and knowing Dr. Coleman. He had moved on to a higher position by the time I got in college. He was more in the administrative building. But Dr. Coleman, and if you can't hear me, if any of the sound is wrong, tell me to cut it up or cut it down. And I'll take a little shot at that. But Dr. Coleman, Dr. Herbert Coleman, he I did hear him play music a couple of times. Um, his instrument was clarinet, woodwinds, and saxophone. But she told me, she said, while he was getting his master, she said, I worked. She said, and then he worked, and then I went and got my my master's, and then he worked, vice versa, and then he went and got his PhD. But Miss Coleman originally went to Grambling State University. She's one of the charter members of the sorority Sigma Gamma Rho, and she's my piano teacher. And what she taught me, you're talking about 1995. Miss Coleman was teaching what you call piano proficiency. And I was afraid of this class because I'm a sax player and I'm thinking, oh, I gotta take piano, oh man. Everybody at that time was like, oh man, we gotta take a couple copies, touch it up. Man, I gotta take piano. But I was looking forward to it because I really love the piano. So what I would do was I would basically play every piano I saw because when I was a little kid, I was at church and I was trying to play the organ, you know, and I was playing ba-da-da-da, 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 ba-da-da-da. And I was just picking out like the Adams Family theme on my on my little church organ at the church. And I was like one of those youngsters where if you told me not to do something, it was probably going to be the very thing that I was going to attempt to do. So somebody said, leave that instrument on. That's expensive stuff. You don't know what you're messing with, right? And of course, yeah, it was a nice Hammond. I don't think it was a B3, but I do think it was like a real nice spinning organ, right? And so I was messing around on it, and I got my first keyboard somewhere around 84, 85. It was a Casio SK1. It may have been earlier than that. It may have been like 81, 82. But I remember I got a keyboard. My mama bought me a keyboard. Shout out to my parents, James and Irma Davis. What's going on, y'all? I know y'all over there eating good, feeling good. Uh, but she bought me a Casio SK1, and this thing had this little orange button on it that was what you call a sampler. So you could like talk. If you remember the teddy bear Teddy Ruxpin, it was like you could squeeze Teddy Ruxpin and he'd repeat what you say. Well, I dismantled my Teddy Ruxpin. I took it was a little red little thing that looks like an intercom. It was up inside the Teddy Ruxpin. I took that little red intercom out, and I could basically push a little, and I opened it up. I got a screwdriver, opened it up, and it was like what would look like a fire, what you call a fire detector, smoke detector. So the little metal would touch a metal on a little metal dome on the inside, and it would start the recording. And then when you let Teddy Ruxpin go, the recording would stop. And so it was just like a fire alarm, because I would take everything apart. Me and my brother, we take apart everything that we got. We get toys, we play with them long enough. We'd be like, okay, let's see how this works. So a lot of youngsters at that time did the same thing. If you were living in the '80s as a little kid, what you did was you opened up stuff because you had never seen stuff like this before. Toys before that were like wooden with a lot of paint on. Really artistic stuff like some artists hand painted that. Those were toys when I was a little bitty kid. But when we got up a little further, uh, it got technical. So that Casio SK1 had a little orange button that was a sample button. And what I would do is I would push that button and you had like 6 seconds to say something. Da, 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 and then you could put that on any key. So it really worked a lot like the Ensoniq keyboards that came after and the different sampler keyboards. I think PV even put out a keyboard or that was a sampler. Is one that PV had one of the first keyboards that had like a disc to go in it. And um, sampling and all that stuff was really big. But when you think about being a person that was in South Dallas, you know, uh, being 9 years old, 10 years old when hip hop reached South Dallas, um, I'm gonna tell you what I saw. Now, a lot of people tell you that, oh, hip hop this, hip hop that. I lived on the street where Boogie Down Productions had a artist, and they really had a. I couldn't explain what the whole concept was, but these guys had a record label, and they rode up and down the street with this Boogie Down Productions, and they were basically the plug in Dallas for Boogie Down Productions. And so all up and down my street, what you would have is you'd have. See, I grew up on a street that had one, two, three, four, maybe 4 or 5 churches on the street. And we talking about the street was only 1, 2, 4 blocks. So every block there was a church, either on this side or that side of the street. Um, so the music I would hear in different kinds of churches. It was a Church of God in Christ. On the furthest extent of the church of the street, that was Lacey Chapel. You know, if you're from Dallas, I say Lacey Chapel. I say Lacey. You know what that is. You know that's like a great musical family. You know, goes all the way into the great jazz singer from Dallas, Jeanette Brantley. Uh, so you know what that is. You know, and so I grew up on that street. Then we had, another church that was kind of like, it seemed like it was a little more progressive. It was some kind of fellowship church. Then it was a Baptist church. And my mama chose to go to church like up the street and around the corner, even though it was five churches on the street. She didn't carry us to a different church every day. She picked the one she wanted, and we went to that church. And so I heard a lot of music. Now, from the Church of God in Christ Church, Lacey Chapel, I would hear basically I hear Sean Lacey. Now, Sean Lacey was on drums, and Sean Lacey would be in there wearing the drums out, like doing the thing on the drums. And so I grew up, like I say, on that street. Cup of coffee, don't want my coffee to get cold. And when this cup is gone, the episode will be over. But so on up and down the street, there were also, there were a couple of houses that were duplex, so you were getting double, influence on the street. We lived in a house that was built like a duplex. It was one big house. My parents moved into this house somewhere around 1979. I remember moving the beds into the truck, and I remember this couple that had a big truck that helped my parents move it, and their names were Fanny and Sugar. I never, I never forget their names because their names were so funny as a little kid. Mr. Fanny. Oh, well, I don't know if he was Mr. Fanny. I don't know who was Fanny and Sugar. Maybe my mom and daddy tell me when they watch it. Somebody in my family tell me who was Fanny and who was Sugar. That might be a whole nother show. That might be a film, Fanny and Sugar. But that was their names. And so where we were moving from was also in South Dallas. So I grew up um, on a street called Carl Street, and I lived in the 3900 block of Carl Street. Um, Basically, it was a house that was built like what I know now to be kind of like a LA type house, uh, patio, screen door, this kind of thing. It was kind of modern like house. Um, but you're talking from about 76 to about 70, 79. I stayed there. Before that, I probably stayed on Collins, Metropolitan, and a couple other streets. So I'm definitely South Dallas through and through. Um, I had a next door neighbor named Bud. And Bud and them made this chocolate cake. And I have some recordings that I'm gonna be putting out talking about Bud and the chocolate cake and his wife. What was her name? I don't know what her name was, but she made the best chocolate cake in the world. Now at this time around South Dallas, you still had guys that would go to the country and hunt. They wouldn't just fish, but they definitely were hunters too. So they'd have, you look in the refrigerator. Some of these guys, man, they'd have all kind of stuff laid out in the refrigerator. But these are some of the thought processes that I'm going through right now, so that I can write some music for my community. Um, what we're attempting to do here is do some matchmaking. Think about it like that. We're gonna do some matchmaking, and we're gonna look at it. I'm just a writing session, right? So we're gonna match make. Now, a lot of times you hear people say, and I'm going back to hip hop in a minute. People say, I ain't no matchmaker, bro. I don't, if you meet folks, you meet them. If you don't, you don't. I don't want to be in the middle of what y'all do. I ain't no matchmaker. But we want to be a matchmaker between 1950s jazz, to be specific. Not necessarily that is, superseding what was happening in the early teens for us blues in Dallas. But we want to focus on 1950s jazz for now. We want to match 1950s jazz with the hip hop of say 1982 through mm, 19 or say the hip hop between 1982 and 2000. Okay, so the hip hop between 1982 and 2000. Okay, now that's just a start. That doesn't mean that we're excluding anything or anything like that. But this is the marriage. This is that we're creating. So we're matchmaking. Let me put this in the camera so you can see it and feel. I just dropped my phone. We're gonna matchmake between the jazz of 1950 and the hip hop of 1982 to 2000 in Dallas, and that's gonna be what we specialize in. Okay, so think about this whole A Cup of Coffee with Jason Davis is kind of like a musical think tank. Not necessarily a lecture, but a think tank. So on my street, you had a DJ that lived on the same side of the street, one house down the church, and then it was their house. And so his name was Steve. I believe Steve was I might get it wrong, but it may have been Stephen Jones. Uh, and so I had a friend named Tiny. I talked about Tiny before. Tiny was not tiny. Tiny was big. That's why they call him Tiny. And Tiny, man, he his aunt stayed down the street, so he used to be over there like sneaking the Frito pie at the house. Like he come outside with all kind of stuff that we be like, we eat. We eating at our house, then we switch and we go eat at Tiny house. So that's what we were doing. Um, so this hip hop on my street, we used to see Steve in there with turntables, putting water on the records, doing all kind of stuff. This was separate than what we saw up the street, um, with the people kind of dressing hip hop, acting hip hop, playing hip hop, and you got to understand at the same time, streets over from my street, like Wellington, and it was, and on into Dixon Circle, it was like people with cars that had big sound systems. And around Dallas, of course, we were listening to D Crew, and we were listening to Dr. Rock, Shay, and then we were listening to Nemesis. And it had a flavor to it that I was hearing and this music was merging. This was local stuff, and a singing group named Destiny at the time too was emerging, and I'm sure there were other things around that were not on my street, but this specifically on my street. We were hearing this stuff, but we were hearing, hip hop wise, as little kids, we were hearing stuff like Get Fresh Crew. We were hearing, of course, W Fresh, Fat Boys, on the cable stations. They were playing Crush Groove and all this stuff. This stuff was coming out on what we call Cube Cable. Uh, it was something before Cube Cable. It was some kind of something vision, but it's just a different antenna on the house, right? And some cable bill that's coming. So, thing is, we saw a lot of hip hop, and we didn't look at it like, as a little kid, we didn't look at it like it was just thing we got to dress like this, man. We were still like dressing like you wearing tough skins and blue jeans, dressing out the Sears catalog basically. And so you were wearing regular clothes. It wasn't like we got into hip hop gear in the '80s. Now somewhere around when Living Color came out and like what was the other show? Different World, those kind of shows. We started to see some hip hop fashion come into play. So yeah, that's when we started to experience what you call the bazaar, the store that's called the bazaar that would sell like Malcolm X t-shirts. It'll sell like different baggy clothes, and then you had like in the mall, you had stores like Oak Tree and JW, and they were selling like cross colors and Jabots, and so now it's like fashion is big because now somebody at your school got every colored Jabos, you know, and the Jabos were these jeans that had the little Jabot strip right across the zipper and cross colors, you know, where crisscross came out. So all that stuff was hidden out. You know, we talking about before that, it was like people beating on windows and people beatboxing in the corner. That was like the big thing when I was a little kid. Like finding a little corner and going right, going over there getting that bass sound, or finding a window in the lunchroom and boom, 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 boom. So people started getting the band, and all people in the band wanted to do was beat on the drums and play that beat. You know, when the band director turned his back or we not doing nothing, they over there boom, 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 right? So all that was happening. But in a organized sense, I remember somewhere around 82, 83, um, before I was even in the band. I was just a little kid going to band practice with my sister Bridget. Shout out to Bridget. What's up, y'all? My brother and sister, so cool. Um, so I went to band practice with Bridget, you know, and it's like, I don't know what year, it's probably, at this time, it's probably 82, 83. But they were playing the Off the Wall album in the marching band at Lincoln High School. And I just remember the same dudes that were on the street doing the scratching and doing the hip hop stuff. Oh, these were the same dudes playing trumpet in the band and over here, you know. So you would see the likes of Sean Lacey, you know, and so or Stephen Jones, you know. And so what you would see was these guys were hip hop and they were also marching band and music guys. So they were into music. So it's nothing new about what's going on now. That's been around. I've been watching this. I've been watching the merger. Um, but they were playing stuff like Out the Wire. And I mean, I heard them play PYT. And I remember just like being a little kid and all that brass hit me. And I'm just like, oh, wait, I'm going to do something like that. And then you could hear drums all over the hood, you know, just from the high school. So those are the early things that I think I could do with this album I'm doing. So I'm doing an album. I guess I should tell you this. I'm doing an album that is not necessarily hip hop and jazz, you know, because we all heard when all that stuff started happening. We heard that bump, you know. I definitely, you know, did some arrangements of that in high school for my high school marching band. Cool like that. We've heard all this stuff is already, you know, been merging. But when a city or area gets a specific particular sound, which I want to talk about that. As you go from cup of coffee toasted up, cup of coffee with Jason Davis, um, when you start to think about different street to street, I'm specifically talking about my street growing up because I want to paint a picture to you of how important each street is to the music that it gives, right? So I'm sure like guys on other streets and people that grew up over here by Colonial and Pine, or somebody that grew up over here on Starks and near Starks and Bear Street, or on down, you know, into Bunton, or even different parts of Dallas, outside of South Dallas, Oak Cliff, West Dallas, you know what I'm saying, North Side, East Side. I'm sure, you know, the people that went to, you know, school like near the suburbs, you know, it was different for everybody. But that really tells you that even in the different neighborhoods, like we look at New York and we say, okay, that's that borough and that's that borough and that's it. All of them have something different. Well, it's definitely like that in the '80s in Dallas. Um, there were clubs, you know, with different DJs and there were things happening, but it's still continuing now. It's just an even more uh, exact and definitive sound coming off different streets throughout the hood. So before this music becomes censored and people start to say, well, you can't record at your house, and you can't do this, or you can't do that, you can't be, having no trap house music and stuff like that. It's cool to go ahead and put this merger together between the jazz scene of the 1950s because within that, I think all of that was circling around the area of, at the time, the street, Oakland Avenue, Carpenter, um, Eugene Street, within that whole mixture of that part of South Dallas, near the Park South Y and throughout through there. I believe that the jazz of the 1950s was coming up out of that area. The Woodman Center, there are guys who lived on down into what we call Bonton, and there were guys who lived even further into East Dallas, uh, and up by Park Row and all that. So there was still a nice, you know, marriage of the jazz scene and the different, styles that were erupting out of the 1950s. But jazz still had a distinctive sound, and it was very soulful. When you talk about clubs like the Green Parrot and the blues scene and what made different people comfortable when they came to town, they said, okay, we're going over to South Dallas. This continued for between the 1950s on into the late 1960s. You know what I'm saying? Before uh, the black music in Dallas had moved on further, right? Start moving north, further north. Um, there was a sound. There was a sound in South Dallas, 1957, 58, 59. I Got a Woman Way Over Town that comes out of South Dallas. And that's, that's the sound of soul. So without name dropping and giving a bunch of names, I'm not interested in that this morning. But so when you start to look at that sound and the solid nature of the 1950s jazz with just great soloists and great bands and great arrangers and songwriters, great organists. There's a lot of great organists in South Dallas at the time that we don't talk about. We don't talk about how important the organ is to that area. That clubs like the Arandas had an organ in it, and people were really getting at it. So we want to look at pulling that sound with the sounds of, say 1982. Well, a lot of the influence of like Public Enemy and all those bands. I remember going to junior high school. You saying like 1988, 89, and I remember like a dude sitting on the steps with his headphones on doing this, and I'm like, "What you listening to?" He like Public Enemy, and I'm like, "What?" He like, "Yeah, I'm listening to uh, I'm listening to this," and I'm like, "Wait a minute." He telling me about hip hop, he telling me about the next move of it, and then, in my neighborhood, when you cross Second Avenue, you go on down Goldspear a little bit, you go into what you call the Meadow Apartments. Oh yeah, it was some hip hop in the Meadows, you know, it was some hip hop. It was D Crew, you know, and so a lot of that was a part of my music growing up. I'm hearing all that. Me and my brother, we beatboxing at the family reunion. We rapping. Got a cousin, Major Malone, my cousin Billy, and Turl. We having rap battles from Dallas to Turl. We having some real classic rap battles. Uh, and these guys are, they come with the Lottie Dottie. When that came out, they coming strong on us. Me and my brother, we were writing raps, because at that time, what you had was rapping and basically playing the dozens was the same thing. That's how we were doing it. We want to score on somebody, which I don't condone the dozens at this point, but when we were young, we didn't know the importance of not playing the dozens. Until our high school teacher told us, don't do that. Don't do that ever again. Y'all got to stop. Y'all got to find something else to do with your time. He eventually got us out there, scoring on people. But it took somebody to teach us that. But at this time, we rapping and we talking bad about each other, and ain't nobody trying to fight because we just, we got the same rap. It kind of starts short one day and then we add a little more to it. And man, shout out, to all my homeboys, Binky, Bucky, James Atkins, Will and Marlon, and all them brothers, man, up and down Hancock, up and down Goldsboro, man, Cliff, you know, we kicked it every day. And we didn't just rap and hang out, man. We played basketball. And then we said, man, what we doing today? We playing football. Everybody get dressed for football. We playing throw up tackles, see what everybody got, and then we start picking teams. We jumped the fence at Pearl C, go behind the back, and start playing football. Then the boys from Dixon, they start walking up real deep. We be like, oh man, we're gonna play a real game now. And so that's what it was. Uh, South Dallas was a great place to live, a great place to walk around and do what we did. We saw the things that were happening, but the music was constant. And once somebody knew that you were into music, you were good to go. Because entertainment, was on the rise. So when we look at taking a type of music from 1950 to a type of music from a long period of time, from 82 to say like 2000, what we want to do is we want to embrace the spirit of the music, but we also want to take those two things, all of that time and culture. So you're talking about from 1950 to 2000 now, instead of breaking it down and saying jazz and hip hop, now we're just saying the entire spectrum of music in Dallas. We want to take that and we want to embrace the new beat, because the new beat is is really an untapped sound when it comes to playing it live and playing it effectively. Now we have the type of drummers here in Dallas, that they already doing this. We got bands all over Dallas that's, killing it, playing, you know, real serious, hip hop, trap, modern music. However, we don't have the 1950s jazz in play. So, what made the 1950s jazz in Dallas so amazing in my book um, was the brotherhood of the different musicians and the camaraderie and the ability for them to switch over to funk, you know, and to switch back over uh, into the jazz arena. And sometimes it was just, a matter of venue or what the opportunity presented. And we don't want to lose the blues. Don't get me wrong. We don't want to lose the blues or the R&B connection, but that's going to come out. That's going to come from the jazz. Because when you shoot for 1950, you getting all the influence of the 1950s jazz in the world, not just in South Dallas. Because once you start to add a Red Garland, then you add the fact that Red Garland left Dallas in, I believe, the 40s, right? And went to Chicago to play a session with Charlie Parker. So now you're seeing that these guys were always a major influence in Dallas music, as well as a major influence in the jazz and the bebop world, even in the block chords and the harmony of people like Miles Davis, of course, John Coltrane and Charlie Parker. So you saying that Red Garland out of South Dallas, out of Dallas, is a influence to 1950s jazz. So bringing those together, in a sense, bringing the 1950s jazz and the hip hop together, that's one move. Now, if we can take all that and group that with what you hear on different streets around Dallas, not just South Dallas now. So you talking about, all the brothers in North Dallas, all the brothers in this part of town, all the Fort Worth rappers and producers, right? Some of the great ones. Shout out to Mousequake, man, Ernie G, the Wombe, brothers like that in Fort Worth, Ty Macklin, Alpha Omega Studios. All these guys, see, they doing something. Natasha Miss Music Talk Box, Queen Rogers. And so Ramon Fowler. When you start to look Sylvester Jones, you know what I'm talking about? My boy Carl Wagner, Carl Wagner, whichever one you want to call. Carl, Bucket, my boy Ray, you know, over there in Fort Worth. He was on some hip hop way back in '93 at Weatherford College. But shout out to Fort Worth in general. Of course, Pat Franklin, Rochella Parks, you know, Fred Jackson, uh, McKinley Jackson, Tony Crenshaw, you know, all the gospel brothers, you know, Myron Williams, Kermit Wells. Fort Worth has a great Peabody, of course, man. Shoot, how would I even not put him in there? Big Jack, Little Jack. Uh, what's my boy name? Uh, I won't get it in a minute. But shout out to Fort Worth. So Fort Worth has its own huge, you know, influence and culture. So all of that, Barnett Coleman, right? Charles Scott, all that sound merging with the Dallas sound, it created the 1950s sound of jazz here, and jazz that eventually influenced soul music, soul jazz, the music of Ray. Think about all that as okay, it happened. We got all that in a big pot now, and we just been stirring it up, right? We just been stirring up that pot of music. What I propose here on this record that I'm working on is the idea of taking this new beat. When I say the new beat, I'm talking about everything from what the bounce music of New Orleans, you know, the body music of New Orleans, also the second line of New Orleans, the street beat, and the music of Devin, the dude, Houston Cats, Scarface, Ghetto Boys. Of course, that was a big part of our music growing up as well. Um, Taking all the Texas beats, you know, all the stuff that comes out of the South. I'm talking about as broad as it can get, from Luke to 3 6 Mafia to, you know, all through, just go straight across the bottom of the United States. And that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about those beats. The stuff out of Atlanta, and here. Stuff from everybody from Big Tuck to, you know, Trap Boy Freddy to the rap stuff. The stuff that you hear when you riding down the street and you start letting the windows up because you don't want to, you don't want to hear it because you hear that beat, you go, oh man, they gonna say something I don't hear, or whatever that is, you know. But taking all that music and just letting it do something with the entire spectrum of music that's already happened from an area. Taking that music, producing it, recording it, arranging it, and giving it to the DJs and let them figure it out. You know, I think that's the play. So just in a nutshell, as long as it took me to get to that point, that's the whole play. Take the music, give it to the DJs, and let them figure out how to present it, how to chop it up, how to, you know, basically give the DJs stems of the recordings, give them acapellas, give them instrumentals, get them the files. You know, giving all the heavyweight, you know, remix artists and producers that give them the music. And so that's the plan, to marry the jazz in Dallas with the new modern music and everything in between. Um, that's the whole point. That has not happened yet, and that's what we plan to do. The coffee is getting cold, cold, cold. Now, I want to end the show. I'll come back and I'll elaborate on some of this stuff, and I'll let you hear some of what I've been working on. I have about 18 songs to this effect. And you can look at it and you say, man, I've been jacking for beats. Yeah, I've been jacking for beats. And so I did some Instagramming on the beats I've been jacking. and I like them. I think they sound good. I've started replacing them with real drums, but the idea is to get them mixed, um, and have them do what they do. Um, Man, I'm gonna try to just warm up a little bit and see what's going on with this saxophone. Like I said, it's early in the morning. I'm trying to keep it quiet, so I won't play long, but I'll play a little bit for you because what's the deal? I ain't played saxophone. I know you want to hear me play. Yeah, so gotta warm up. All right. So I need to do more long tones. I need to do some warming up on my horn before I start going hard. Mm. Shout out to my mouthpiece manufacturer, Theo One. Classic mouthpieces. I endorse the Theo One Durga number 9, Durga 3, Durga number 9. Uh, and what I got here is because I'm kind of skeptical about buying reeds for my saxophone, I'm just keeping the same ones that I've been had. And I keep a little bag over my mouthpiece now. But for obvious reasons, I'm sure you know. But I'm not gonna go too hard this morning on the saxophone, but I promise to come back after I do some more long tones and warm my lips up. I promise to come back and do some playing for you a little later today. In an episode of another show that I produced called How I Met Jazz. So I'll do a little bit more playing the saxophone at that time. I hope um, I hope you can give me some feedback on your experiences with early music in Dallas, uh, stuff that happened on your street. Uh, but I had a deep musical influence on the street that I grew up on. Like I said, five churches, Boogie Down Productions and DJs and just people listening to music all over the place. There was even a man on the corner. I never knew his name, but I would walk by his house and he would always be playing some jazz. His door open. I mean, this man played the real deal every day. Every day, this man had an album on. I never talked to him. He see me with my case. He never said one. I think he speak, but I heard some good jazz coming out of it. Like at the very end of my street, right before you get to what you call Miss K's convenience store. Um, so yeah, man, it's a lot of good music coming out the hood. Um, Also on my street, uh, Leroy Ward had a band called Lazar, and they were practicing in the garage every week, nighttime. He must have been the guy in the band that had the house. So they would get back there and they rehearsed, and you heard music. So I heard the best of the best. I saw amps plugged up, guitar players, and of course, I wanted to join the band. I think I came out there with my horn one day. But shout out to Mr. Leroy Ward, man. Number of love for you and your family, brother. Uh, I'm sure we'll talk soon. But a cup of coffee with Jason Davis. If you want to support what I do in any kind of way, you can send me a cash app to Jason Davis Jazz, cash app / Jason Davis Jazz. I'll put some links to other ways. I think Cash App is pretty cool. Um, if you want to PayPal me some money, you can support what I do and these types of programs by putting in my email address, jasondavisjazz@yahoo.com. You can email me if you want to submit your music to the Dallas Jazz Collective Records. Please do. Um, we plan on getting into it with this music thing. This week was the week I was scheduled to be in Brooklyn, New York. Oh, it's a bittersweet feeling not being able to be in New York this week, playing at Williamsburg Music Center, and just the whole idea of taking the music of my upbringing in my neighborhood to New York. That was a big part of what we plan on doing. Moving forward is letting people know that the music we play and the talent and all these things, it's no secret. The history, the culture, the influence, and the what you would call the contributions of Dallas artists to the music of the entire world. Fort Worth artists, North Texas artists, Texas artists, artists that were influenced to me growing up. Not just people that I heard of, but people that actually worked with me musically, and influenced people that directly were influenced on me and my music and what you hear when you hear me play. Um, that contribution is no secret that it is, born and bred in this area. So this area has a lot more to offer. And I think that having respect for the new music and the new artists, the rappers, if you're a rapper out there, I am looking for you because I got about 18 tracks, of some stuff that has the rap beats, but the jazz music. I have to call who you know. You got to look on these records and find out who's producing that stuff. What this is a merger. Now, lastly, before we leave, we got a little more coffee left, and of course, it is cold. I want to shout out some people that have been looking out for us. Now, there are a couple of CDs and people with CDs that I cannot shout you out. Look at that, I got a little flash going. I cannot shout you out. We used to do that. Just play with mirrors. But I can't shout you out because your CDs have been sold out in our CD little shop. So if I don't put your CD on there, it's because either you have brought one or because the CDs you have